over to you, Dr. Anbu.
Okay, hi, good evening, everyone.
Good evening to you.
With you. It's a pleasure seeing different faces from different parts of the country, definitely, and others who have joined in. And thanks for the opportunity, Shwarya. So today, let me take you through what we have attempted as design thinking in our organization. Now, it's a journey that we have taken in the past few years in terms of how do we bring in design thinking. I'm sure you would have heard about design thinking, if not formally trained or attended sessions. For some of you who may not have, what we have done world over, design thinking has been taken as a problem solving approach or a process, and which is what we also attempted to do several years ago. Let's say about 8 or 10 years ago, our founder chairman Arun Jain of Intellect Design Arena, when he bumped into this in Stanford University, he said, wow, this sounds exciting. Let's go ahead and apply this into our problem solving. And our domain is developing software for fintech, completely banking and insurance products. When we applied design thinking process as is, or in other words, if I could use the word, we just aped it from what it was in Stanford, we ran into challenges, and I should confess that we failed. We did fail miserably at the beginning several years ago. So we kind of took a step back and started wondering, why is this not working? When it is working somewhere else, why is this not working? And that is when we realized, which was a big blind spot for us, design thinking is a lot more than just a process. And in that journey, we realized it is actually a life skill, which requires a mindset to approach design thinking, right? Not just the process. So that took us on a huge journey. And today we are where we are, and we not only applying design thinking for solving customers' problem in terms of fintech products. We are on a journey driven by purpose, if I can say, and that's what School of Design Thinking is. It's technically a Section 8 organization where we wanted to promote design thinking as a culture across different sections of the society. Starting with academics, schools, colleges, we work with a lot of NGOs. We work with the government offices as well. We have taken all the way up to Gram Panchayat, all working on how do we prepare a design mind for solving problems, rather than just to throw a process at them. And that works on how do we therefore shift their thinking. So we gave a nice twist to design thinking. We said, let's approach it as design the thinking of people, and then go into applying design thinking process. So that's how we have split it. So the flagship program Shwarya mentioned is based on our copyright work on design the thinking of people, which is what I thought I would share today with you, because I felt it's very relevant for the profession that we are all in. And every time I do coaching, I coach at ISB. I'm an executive coach for ISB, which I take some time off from my work and spend time at ISB. I have always tried to relate to how do I take elements of design thinking that not only enhances the coaching experience for the coaches, but also the coach, and finally can we arrive at helping them identify blind spots and aha moments. Okay. So let me try and share the screen here. Okay, are you able to see the slides?
Yeah.
Okay. So like I said, design the thinking is basically our trademark work of how do we shape the mindset for transformation. And if you're wondering what the different types of birds are doing in the slide, our journey started with, of course, credit is to our chairman when he observed birds of different variety, that too migratory birds, peacefully coexisting in a single tree, right? Through his balcony one day, he kind of observed. He's a person who observes a lot of things around him. And when he observed, he was wondering how can birds of different, not only variety, but that too migratory birds as well, peacefully coexist. Versus when you put 10 leaders in a room, and we know what happens, right? Anything other than in the name of collaboration, everything else potentially happens, right? In many places, if not all. So that got him to think, why is there a difference? And the conclusion is possibly, it's one theory, that birds probably have a three-dimensional or a boundaryless view of things. You know, they see a really limitless opportunities in front of them. Therefore, they don't see the necessity to fight. And that is the journey of how do we bring in that mindset to a human being, right? So that's what design the thinking is. And therefore, what is design thinking? It's human-centered, as we all know, it's human-centered. But it is also and almost always future-focused, right? It is not about solving today's problem. By the time you solve today's problem, your customers ask for more. By the time you deliver it, customer asks for more. And this is a classic statement that Steve Jobs has made when he was asked, why did you come up with iPhone? When BlackBerry at the same time was adding one extra button saying that click this button, your mailbox will open immediately. And Steve Jobs said, get rid of the keyboard. So the answer he gave was, listen, I'm looking at future, not today. Someone else is solving today's problem. I'm looking at future focus. And of course, you have to create value in the due process to the end user. So having said that, would any problem be applicable for applying design thinking? In our experience, no. We are looking at design thinking as a classic thing for solving a wicked problem, right? Not like a straight problem where you know what the problem is and you know what the solution is. A simple solution, let's go ahead and solve it instead of saying I need to apply design thinking, right? So that is the a note of caution that I wanted to leave with all of you. And the way we approached then was, of course, starting with design mind. And we didn't stop at that. Then we went into design space for people to practice what they have understood. The space is the one that potentially gives them, and those of you who may be based out of Chennai, or others who may be traveling to Chennai, it'll be a pleasure to take you around our design center, which is the world's first design center for applying design thinking for fintech solution that we have in Siriseri IT Park in the IT highway in Chennai. It's about a 35,000 square feet center we have set up about 6 years ago, which helps people go through the journey of applying design thinking. So it is not about just teach them in the classroom, then go back and give them that environment where they start applying. And then design frameworks which will help them to be more focused in applying design thinking. And finally, we all know about process which will ensure that repeatability with whatever we do. Right? So this is the four-pronged approach that we have been following, which has shown us results. For example, if I had to give you an IT example, there are cases where we have delivered a product customized to customers at least 45 days ahead of committed schedule with single-digit UAT defects. Right? For those of you in IT or have been in IT before, you would really appreciate what that would take, right? In terms of ahead of schedule and single-digit defects, right? So how did we do this? So we have attempted this with our own. So everybody has their own design thinking process. If you go and hit Google design thinking process, it will probably throw up some millions of results in probably 0.18 seconds, let's say, starting with Stanford to IDEOs to whatnot. The reason for us to do this is we start with preparing the design mind, which is a very unique approach, and I have at least not seen this being followed by anyone else. There are organizations which have taken a mass inoculation approach of training all the employees on design thinking process, leaving the workforce confused. Especially one IT organization that I know of left the workforce confused Because in IT, you are looking at analytical mind, right? For an analytical mind, if they see 10 people, for them, it is 10 data points. For a design thinking mind, it is 10 human beings, right? That shift happens with the design mind. Therefore, that's why you are seeing a different process that we had come up with, which kind of suits our environment that we work on. And this is the process that we have applied across to different sectors of the society as well. Which starts with empathizing. We all know empathizing. But between empathizing and define is where we teach them how do you peel layers after layers to go down to the root cause of the problem. Many times we see that a problem is solved and it still exists even after having spent time to solve the problem, right? That may be many occasions that what you are seeing as a problem is not a problem, it is a symptom, right? Simple example is we go to a doctor saying headache. The doctor keeps on giving you medicine for a headache, it keeps on coming back again, it goes away, it comes back again. And then you go to a specialist. The specialist checks you out and then says, you know what, I'm going to put you on an acid blocker and few antacid medicine on a good diet. Because the problem is in your stomach, the symptom is a headache, right? So that we have certain tools that helps you to peel the layers and go to the root cause of the problem. Right. One of the things that we say, what I mean by root cause of the problem is one of the tools that we use is called 5 Whys that we have borrowed from Toyota's the why chain. Let's say if there is a welding floor accident happens, a welding specialist gets burnt. The immediate question they will ask is, why did the person get burnt? Because he or she was not wearing the protective gear. They'll say, okay, so that is the problem. Because the protective gear was not there, the person got burnt. So the solution is make a strict policy. You can even go up to consequences for it, saying if you don't wear a protective gear, we are going to penalize you by taking 2 hours of your pay or 1 hour of your pay. But if we go further in a typical 5 Why chain of peeling layers after layers and solving a problem, you'll find why was the person not wearing a protective gear even after knowing it is important? Because it was too hot in the room. Why was it too hot? The AC air conditioning is off. Why is the air conditioning off? The 3-phase connection is fluctuating too much. So they decided to turn the air conditioning off. So what started off as a potential disciplinary action as a solution to fixing the power supply to have a consistent air conditioning flow is a solution, right? So that's what we are talking about in terms of peeling layers. And rest is a traditional one, divergence in terms of going into brainstorming and come up with crazy ideas, then do a convergence, and finally storytelling. The key here, and these are some of the things from here, for example, listening. Of course, we all are as a coach experts in listening, otherwise we wouldn't be specializing or succeeding in where we are today in our journey as coaches, right? One of the biggest thing is listening. So how do you listen for things that are not being said is the key, right? Not just the things that one of your coaches say it, what is not being said, that comes out of observing. What am I observing about what is happening around my coachee and the ecosystem of the person, right? And for us, observation becomes a hygiene factor and a habit, not on demand. And what I mean by that, for example, let's say you drive every day 10 kilometers to go to work, the same road that you have been taking for several years. Suddenly you decide that, you wanted to construct a new house. Okay. You've decided to construct a new house. And all of a sudden, the moment that thought has come into your mind, you start noticing different types of balconies and compounds and compound wall and different landscape in the houses while you are driving. And remember, this is the same road that you have been driving several years. You never noticed any of those houses. And now that there is a need, you start noticing all the unique looking houses. And that's the observation we are talking about. But as coaches, it becomes very impactful then when we start having that as a habit or a practice than on demand. And dialogue, of course, we know our journey as a coach always goes on dialoguing with the coachee rather than discussing or debating, right? And a simple example being, don't want to sound preachy, but a discussion or let's say debate versus dialogue, we know debate is who's right and dialogue is what is right. Right? So for design thinking, it is all about dialoguing to find out what is the right approach and what is the right solution. So a quick view of what all can we design. When we took a step back from designing IT solutions to some of these things, we looked at what all we can design. We can design our healthy lifestyle. For example, for me, my one of my favorite things that I do outside of my office whenever I find time for one of the charities is life design lab. How do I work with folks who are into that midlife, I don't want to call it crisis, the conflict.
Just a moment, Dr. Anbu, to interrupt you. Can somebody please mute your microphone? There is a sound coming from a child talking. Can you please mute it? Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So it's about how do I design my life journey itself, applying some of these design thinking process, and which is where I feel some of the elements of coaching that we do could help in them designing a career journey and designing their life journey rather than just addressing, tweaking their performance depending on the type of coaching that you get into with that coaching. Language could be designed. Languages have been, if you look at Devanagari script, the three different major categories of the script comes from one that where the sound comes from the throat, the other one comes from the tongue, and the other one comes from the lip. If you go back and look at it, so that has been carefully designed. We know a city, urban city, and this can be designed, educational system, financial system, to basically anything and everything, right? Therefore, why can't we design a career journey for all the people whom we coach and touch their lives, right? And how does that work? Let's take a step back and look at what we do as a design thinking approach at Intellect Design Arena, School of Design Thinking. Understanding requirements. Stated is given. Unstated requirements are the tricky ones, but those are the ones that you unearth by observing patterns, dialoguing, and listening and asking questions. Unstated requirements, when not addressed, is when it makes anything that we design, be it a product or service, fails. Or a customer comes back the day after you deliver asking for changes. Unstated requirement in a personal journey, especially in a family friend, we all assume certain things and say that that's what my kids want or that's what my spouse wants. But when we understand the unstated requirement, the journey becomes more beautiful. And how does that happen? By observing patterns and anti-patterns or constraints, right? By patterns, we are saying what are the things that are working well. So for a coachee, what are the things that are working well in the journey, in a career or at work? Let's say you coach based on a 360 degree. I know there are several different ways to do this. If you are coaching them based on a 360 degree feedback, there are certain patterns that emerge saying that, hey, listen, this is how I think you are taking a journey with your team and they are appreciating that, right? You continue to do that. You leverage that or you take that as a positive and see what else can I do. At the same time, anti-patterns, things that are going wrong, things that are not done correctly. Okay. By the way, let's say, for example, in one of the things you would probably notice that as a leader, neither am I providing clarity on work for my team members, nor am I hitting them with non-negotiable deadlines, right, or performance criteria. At the same time, I am throwing up too much of stress on them. You know, that's a clear anti-pattern, right? You haven't told me clearly what is expected out of me. Neither have you set any criteria or performance criteria saying how am I expected to work. and on top of it, you are getting me into more stressful environment, is a clear anti-pattern. And I think when we connect those dots and give them a pattern, anti-pattern, is when they start identifying certain blind spots. Right? And this has been my experience in the coaching journey, is connecting some of those and say, listen, there is an anti-pattern emerging from all of these things. Right? On one side, you're saying you mean good. On another side, you're not spending time with the team. Or on one side, you are saying everybody is equal. On another side, you are giving somebody more work or more importance. Right? When I connect this dot, there is an anti-pattern that comes up. And finally, the blind spot is, you could call this as the last quadrant of the Johari window, but it is clearly, I don't know what I don't know. Right? And that comes out, and identifying this, I feel, is the sweet spot. Right? How do I identify this? That becomes the sweet spot. And there are many examples of how things have failed. Classic example is Gillette when it was introduced. Some of you would know the case study. Gillette when it was introduced in India, massive failure. Why? Because they did a study, market analysis, as a lot of companies do. They found Indians love to shave. So there is a huge business. We're going to go back home with a truckload of money. Great, let's design a great product. So they designed. And then they said, it's a testing time. They designed it based on several parameters, including Asians have thicker texture hair, right? So, and somebody suddenly decided testing can be done with the Asians in the US. Why go all the way to India? After all, they are also Indians. Same DNA, right? Same style. Somebody said, yeah, good. So they did, and it worked perfect. They came and launched and failed miserably. They were wondering what went wrong. Believe me, Gillette sent a bunch of people asking them to go after the customers and observe them, observe what they are doing while shaving. And some of us have seen father or grandfathers, for them shaving is an episode, right? They put a mirror in front of them, they start shaving, and then if we notice carefully, there will be a very small cup of water in which they dip and clean the razor. This did not come out when it was tested in the US. The blind spot was they assumed that there is running water available across the globe. Though running water was available in India, we are always being frugal. We treat water as a rare commodity and a precious commodity. They unearthed so many other blind spots, right? Which also means at that time when they introduced, this is what, 2-3 decades ago, joint family was predominant, which means male of the house in a larger family with one room to freshen up and do their daily chores, male of the family gets up earlier and have to finish all the shaving and all that, which means they almost always shave either in dark or in a very less lighted area. So they went back to their design, redesigned the whole thing and launched, and now we know rest is history. So that is one of the classic examples of how do you keep observing to identify blind spots, right? Be it in a product or service or in the domain that we are in terms of coaching. Okay. So you could take a guess. This for us, this is a classic example of application of design thinking and unstated requirements, right? So ever since we got into this journey, we are going back to see, we keep hearing the word, okay, is this an old wine in a new bottle? Maybe. That made us to go back into some of the scriptures and history of hundreds of years to see, did design thinking exist intuitively? And I think, yes, it did. So Arun Jain, he had gone into a lot of research into Jain philosophy itself to see what exists there. And so therefore, a lot of the things that we have unearthed, one is the religion itself was designed, Sikhism, right? When there was invasion happening, intensely, group of people decided we have to prepare ourselves. So the founder decided, I'm going to go and request the elder son be given from each family to fight for this cause, right? And then he was looking at how do I prepare their mind to fight a war, right? There is no simulation games, right? There is no formal training available and things like that. So what all he did was he redesigned how you call them, right? First is, of course, they taught them humility and all of these things. We know how Sikhism religion, how humility was taught in terms of you got to bend down, clean the floor, and etc., etc. One of the key things he did was he took the name and he said, I'm going to add a Singh to it. Amar Singh, which says, Singh, you are the lion, right? You are going to fight like a lion. So you are Amar Singh. And he didn't stop at that. He also said, you're going to win. So which means we're going to call you Amarjeet Singh, right? So you will see many names come out as Paramjeet Singh, Amarjeet Singh. And that is how he designed this whole thing in terms of influencing their thought process and their mindset to fight a war. And the next one, I know it's probably closer to dinner time, but the idea is not to kind of get your taste buds going up. But when we researched into how do we leverage constraints, how have people leveraged constraints to design a food system? South India, this side of the country, we know it's always hot, hotter, hottest. And staple food is rice. So how do you provide a nutritious food for kids? Idli is one of the main things, right? It's one of the favorite ones in this part of the country. So it is three portions of rice, and one portion of rice has the carbo and starch, and one portion of dal, urad dal, that has the protein, the iron and whatnot that is required for the kids' nutrition. Soak it, grind it, make a batter, and it ferments overnight. Correct? And they make idli. Then these are we are talking about days when there were no refrigerators available. And the fermentation process continues. That we call it as a frictional force, right? A constraint. Fermentation keeps on continuing the next day night as well. And you're looking at large family where they make huge batter. So the day two, they came up with making dosas, not idli. For those of the dosa lovers, you will know, you will quickly find out if the dosa is made out of fresh batter or a batter that's 1 day old. From the taste, it'll taste too bland if it is day one. And vice versa, if the idli is made on day two batter, it will not be as soft as day one batter because the fermentation continues, right? And third day, the fermentation keeps continuing, right? How do we leverage that constraint rather than saying we are struggling with the constraint? How do I take advantage of the constraint is when they come up with uttapam. It's more of a pancake size shape, little thicker, but they offset it by sprinkling with onions or carrots and tomatoes and whatnot. It offsets that even more intense taste of sourness that comes out of fermentation, right? So to us, that's a classic design that existed several years ago in terms of how do I take advantage of the constraint, right? And that is one of the things we follow in design thinking is when you face a constraint, don't back off and say, I'll go to the next route for solution. When I face a constraint, how do I leverage the constraint to provide a better solution, right? And in isolated cases, may not be in all cases, in isolated coaching cases that I have experienced, somebody faces a constraint. I said, I am this, I cannot do anything beyond this. This is what I am. And sometimes, at least me, I have got stuck. And what do I do now? The person says, this is it. I can't be any different. Okay, so then we start working on, if this is the constraint, how do I help him leverage that constraint? Right, so that has been a big thing for us. And for the cricket fans, classic example is Muthiah Muralidharan. With this bit of a constraint and the challenge in his elbow, everybody said he can never be in cricket. or any sport for that matter. And he leveraged that constraint. He used the constraint to his advantage. And today, arguably, he was one of the best bowlers that ever existed in cricket, right? So all of these things, how do you identify and apply this to your advantage to find solution, be it product, services, or in our coaching journey. So we have come up with 13 elements. We call it as 13 musical notes. It starts with skills, a regular routine skills. Then we also need people with expertise, right? Coaches are experts to begin with, right? We are experts. Coaching, with the skill of coaching alone, I don't know if we can go too deep into showing our coaches their aha moments or insights or blind spots, right? Under the blind spots. We have that expertise because we go deeper and deeper and deeper into what we do. But what helps is to have a perspective of what is going on, which means when expertise is something you go 30,000 feet deep, perspective is you go 30,000 feet above and see the entire ecosystem around the coach's behavior. A classic example, several years ago, 2-3 decades ago, mail order catalog in the US, for those of you who would have spent time in the US or traveled, you would have noticed there is mail order catalog through which you buy items. Look at the item, look at the mail order catalog, mark down, tear the last perforated page. I have done it when I was there. I used to be addicted to mail order catalog, ordering anything from books to cutleries to whatnot. Send the check, it comes back, and then you realize this is not the size that I thought it was, or this is not the color. Then you go through the painful process of packaging and shipping it back. And what all Jeff Bezos did was connect the mail order catalog to e-commerce that existed at that time. That's all he did in the name of Amazon. That was possible. He went 30,000 feet to say there are people who love to buy things and struggling. And then there is e-commerce and internet that exists. Can I connect these two? That's when you get ideas. And finally, that brings in alignment to what we are trying to solve. While this is drivers, 5 drivers of growth, there are frictional forces. And I feel this is very, very close to what we do. It starts with the doubts in the minds of people, right? Have I taken the right decision? Is my plan thorough? Is there a better way to do it? And we would have bumped into several situations in our journey where there are leaders walking around with the doubts in their minds. Therefore, they delay the decision, or sometimes they don't make the decision at all. Let the system kind of evolve and things will take over. Right? So how do you identify that the person is struggling with doubts and conflict in their heads about opinion, about perspective, about expectations, conflict of expectations. And we do a lot of leadership program on design thinking. One question we almost always ask in every session is, when was the last time you had a conflict with your supervisor? Right? And frankly, till date, it has been a pin drop silence after the question, unfortunately. But nevertheless, how do we identify that this kind of conflict is healthy? It is okay. For a coachee, when they have a conflict with the subordinates, their team members, is when it helps to show them, listen, the conflict is not with the person, but the conflict is there is difference of opinion, difference of expectation. Maybe your team member is seeing something different in a work environment than you are seeing. Why don't you help him understand what is better, or why don't you understand there might be something better there? Right? That's conflict. Anger, we all know, comes out of purely helplessness. It is not about this person did something wrong, so I'm angry. No, this person did something wrong, but you're so helpless because you are unable to fix it, change it, or accept it. So you get angry. And angry with authority for leaders, that's a disaster, right? We all know that. And fear. fear of the unknown. Rest of them we know, fear of going wrong, failure, commitment. Fear of the unknown that they live through for the rest of their career without knowing why they have fear, and therefore they don't take decisions or take risks, right? And finally, this is one of my favorites, and ego, not from any philosophical point of view. Ego as in, as a leader, I know it all, right? So there was in one coaching session, a very senior, successful leader. So in a one-on-one session, I was chatting up with him saying why innovation or creativity is not all that great in his team because of the way 360 showed. So I asked him, how do you conduct a brainstorming? He said, no, they'll give ideas, 5, 10 ideas. If it is stupid, I just stop them and then say, come on, I'm going to tell you what to do. Here, do it. You guys have no ideas at all. These are all really stupid, silly ideas, and that's it. Right? So we have to go into a detail of how a brainstorming works and why the people say quantity is more important than quality, and how do you let people go with crazy ideas. Eventually some good idea will come and all of that bit. But fundamentally, this stems from, as a leader, I know it all. And the moment that mindset comes in, I think the growth is stopped. We are dealing with a boundary that the leader has drawn, and the team will never grow outside of that boundary. Right? Having said this, and by the way, this is decaf, as in decaffeinated coffee, right? Decaf as a frictional forces. Having said this, are they really easy to identify first? Even if we identify with the coach, how do we let them understand it? It's a journey that we need to think of and take one step at a time, but it does come through. And we call this as capacity levers, 3 capacity levers out of the 13 elements. First is vulnerability. How much do I know or realize that I'm sitting in a comfort zone? And that is clearly, it's a hygiene thing as I see it for all coaches, to say, listen, you're clearly sitting in a comfort zone. The sooner you get out and start doing things better and get out and start raising your bar, you're better off, or you're going to be not relevant, right? You may not lose the job, but you may not be relevant. So how do we show them? And therefore, how do we show them between a comfort zone to vulnerable zone? There is a zone of vulnerability, right? Between one zone to another. How do they sail through? And appreciation, right? We know it's a very simple thing. However, it's my personal experience, both in corporate and when we are teaching, running these workshops for different types of people. For several reasons, leaders and people in general withhold appreciating generally, very generously rather. We have a little acronym for it. We say GST, right? And we use this GST acronym for nearly 10 years. Now that GST has come, it becomes difficult for us to use that acronym, but I still do. Is it should be genuine, specific, and time-bound. Right? You don't wait for 10 days to appreciate a person for something he or she did today. Right? And how do we teach or let the coaches know that appreciation does not necessarily mean you're showing your weakness? I'm just purely sharing what I have observed with some of my coaches in my journey, right? And they also feel sometimes, oh no, when I appreciate, they take advantage of me. Or they ask me more money, promotion, everything. Right? But appreciation doesn't have to be in words. Appreciation doesn't have to be in email. I was taken aback when I was coaching one of the corporates here, one of the leaders, and at the end of this whole thing, 2-3 times, I liked what he did. I was patting on his back. I think that's a brilliant, you acknowledged what it is. And then later he came out and said, you know what, that twice that you gave me that pat, that gave me a lot of motivation and energy, thinking that I can do better. So we may never know where each one picks up their energy or their transformation point, right? And finally, limiting beliefs, we know, so I don't have to elaborate on that. How do we help them see that they are running into limiting beliefs as coaches? So this is just a quick thing about, I did mention how we approach design thinking. So when we failed several years ago, we went back to the whiteboard and said, let's rejig this whole thing. So therefore, design the thinking is the first step, and then we go into thinking the design, right? So it is basically about changing the viewpoint from ours to that of the user. Am I seeing what the user is seeing, right? Am I feeling what the user is feeling? Am I thinking what the user would be thinking? Then that helps to unearth more solution that the user would benefit from, rather than something that you think is correct. So here, so this is something that we had come up with in our journey, that we realized when we were applying design thinking. This is in the recent past, about a year and a half ago, we came up with this, or probably a year, little over a year. How do we sharpen this approach, right? For example, brainstorming, people come up with 100 ideas, let's say. And then we tell them, how do you delete 90% of the ideas? You can't deal with 100 ideas to solve a problem. How do you delete 90% of the ideas? This is when you will see the decaf element playing havoc, right? They'll have an ego of saying that, no, my idea is good, so I'm going to protect my idea by all means. So where we have come up with this 10, 100 and 1000 gram as a prioritization technique. See, for example, if you have a list of 10 things to do, you ask people, they'll say, okay, in a priority of 1 to 10, I have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, people will pick 3 items that they would have completed. That may not have given huge impact, mainly because the one huge impact item might be item number 5, right? So therefore, for us, the learning was prioritizing in a linear way. We never felt that prioritizing or weightage is linear. Weightage is exponential. And if it is weightage, you have to feel the weight. That's when we came up with this as 10 gram, 100 gram, 1000 gram. Today, we follow that as a vocabulary, saying, what is your 1000 gram problem that you're solving? I'm not worried about 10 gram problems right now. Right? That is one. And of course, less is more. This is something that we have learned a lot and gone into. Less is more, and last 2% equals 200%. Right? Be it in a coaching journey, definitely. It is not about coaching them, making them see the insight. It is all comes down to how do we give them a actionable plan that they will go back. Right? They'll go back, take it, and start seeing some results, and therefore transformation. Right? That I always feel is in the last 2 to 5% of our journey with the coaching. Classic example outside of our domain is why do people still prefer to pay twice the cost to go to Oberoi versus, let's say, a Marriott or some place, right? Both is a 5-star hotel, technically. Oberoi's last 2% experience is 200%. You go to an Oberoi, you will almost always will never be allowed to wait too long to check in. Even if there is a crowd, if they are not able to handle, they got your keys, they'll take you to your room and say, we will send somebody to do the check-in process, sir, if that is okay with you. You would have come from a long travel, we want you to rest and relax. Please let us know a good time, we will send somebody to finish the check-in process. I mean, to me, that is beautiful. Imagine you're taking a red-eye flight, landing up there at 7:30 in the morning, there are 20 people, you have to wait half an hour in the lounge. Right? So this, for us, the 3 laws of design thinking, why did we bring in? To sharpen our approach in design thinking. And from coaching, so I have mentioned through our conversation, first is identifying the blind spots. How do you help identify the blind spots for the coachee? Therefore, they understand what they didn't know till now. Right? That comes out of purely observing patterns and anti-patterns. Keep observing what they are saying. Keep observing how they are saying it. Keep observing how they are behaving. Right? And finally, probing question within the framework of thinking. Right? So we call it as framework thinking. So it is not, we all know about confirmation bias. So probing question should be the complete opposite of confirmation bias. So what happens is when in our minds, when we have decided this is the problem for the person, all of our questions goes towards only that. I'm not saying that is wrong, but the moment at least this is purely my experience, so bear with me when I share it, you will probably be practicing it already. When we realize that it's hitting a roadblock, I go step outside of my confirmation bias and go into probing question within a framework of the frame of thinking, saying that in a larger frame, I'm trying to help him see an insight into his behavior of wanting to be biased towards some of his team members. So my question would then switch to, tell me how else do you assign tasks to the team members? Tell me how are they performing? Tell me the last occasion that you have spent quality time with this team member who says that you are ignoring him. Right? That probing question kind of shifts their defensive mechanism to starting to see insight, saying that, okay, there is a bias in my mind and I do have a blind spot there, right? So that's what I'm talking about as probing questions. So these are the three things that at least stands out for me in several of the design thinking things that we do in terms of how it is applicable to our profession or the passion that we are in. And finally, we love this quote because design thinking is all about, or any problem solving is all about being curious. Right? Being curious brings in more thoughts, more ideas, and more importantly, if I'm curious, I start observing. If I am curious, I start questioning. And the key thing is questioning assumptions. When you start questioning assumptions, things break open, right? Rather than saying things have always worked this way, so it'll continue working this way. And all of that for us, we have seen comes out of being curious. Right? So that's all I had. I thought I'll share, and I know I was given 45 minutes, so we'll have some questions as well. If you have any questions, we can discuss and dialogue on the questions.
Can you please stop share your slides?
Yes.
Anbu?
Done.
So anybody, any questions? Nilofer is asking, vulnerability is between comfort zone and what else?
Okay, vulnerability is moving from one zone to another, right? Let's say you are today a business head, or let's say a delivery head in a software parlance, right? Delivering projects, services, products. And suddenly somebody sees that you're really doing great when you're dealing with customers. You're really doing great when you're doing a beautiful story selling, right? So not storytelling, story selling. So that gives a trigger to the boss to say, you know what, I'm going to move you to being a sales head for this country. So therefore, you are moving from one zone, comfort zone, which is
Hello, can you guys hear me? Hello, am I audible?